What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode. Today is April 9th, and we are going to be talking about a very important chart that still looks very good for Bitcoin, in my opinion. Now, I talked about the daily chart yesterday for Bitcoin, and there was bullish divergence, and there has been oversold bounces along the way. However, on the daily time frame, it doesn't look as good right now because the bullish divergence basically got invalidated. We're gonna take a look into that chart real quick, but there is a chart on a higher time frame that still looks very bullish. And if we actually zoom into the smaller time frames, I will show you that there are reversal signals basically all over the smaller time frames as well. Okay, so let's take a look into what is going on with Bitcoin, starting with a higher time frame chart. Okay, so on the higher time frame chart, the weekly time frame, we are still on the weekly 50 SMA. We have not touched that support for quite some time. I mean, since about September of last year, right? So I still expect this support to at least hold for this week, right? Because we haven't been on it. Now, what it does after this week, I don't know. But when we are on a support, what that usually tells me is we are usually going to get a bounce. Now, how far that bounce goes, I usually take a look into the smaller time frames and see if I can get any clues on that, right? But I think we are at least going to get a bounce, and we are, I see the bulls actually buying it up. We actually wicked down to about 74.6, and currently we're back about 77.3, right? So let's see if this support holds. It usually holds, okay. Now, nothing in this market is 100%, but I'm just saying in terms of probability, okay? Let's come to the 3-day time frame, which is the time frame I am focusing on today because it closes in about 9 hours here. And I think we still have a pretty bullish chart here because we have a double bottom, right? As you guys can see. Now, this double bottom is, well, we still have 9 hours until it finishes, right? If this double bottom actually gets invalidated, what I'm looking at is the RSI here, which is, it's kind of subtle, but we still do have bullish divergence here on the RSI on the 3-day time frame, and it looks like it could still take quite a bit of a push from the bears to actually invalidate that bullish divergence. So I'm saying, in terms of probabilities, that this still looks pretty good for the bulls. Okay, because it's gonna take quite a bit of a push for the bears to actually invalidate not only this double bottom, but this bullish divergence on the 3-day time frame. And I did bring up that there could be a falling wedge pattern that is developing. Not completely, but I am estimating the bottom trend line here because of what I'm seeing here. And if this double bottom breaks, price action could potentially wick down or even come down to about 71,000. That is where I have the bottom trend line, and that is my estimate. I think it's still very important to have an estimate so I can get at least a pretty good idea on when to open and close positions, right? Even though there could be times where price action does breach the estimates, but at least I have a good idea of where the price action is, where support is, where resistance is. Okay. Now let's come over to the daily time frame, where yesterday I mentioned there's bullish divergence on this daily time frame, right? Quite a bit. Okay, as you guys can see, we've had oversold bounces, not successful, and then yesterday yesterday we still had bullish divergence, but since the price action has actually gone down to about 76,000, this bullish divergence on this daily time frame is basically broken, in my opinion, right? So basically, what I'm looking at really right now is the 3-day time frame, not so much the daily time frame right now, right? But I am also looking into the smaller time frames. Okay, on the 12-hour time frame, we do have reversal signals as well, right? This is by the book, double bottom, bullish divergence, and we're getting a pretty good bounce here. If very important to be paying attention to how this candle closes as well, because right now it looks like a pretty good bounce, and what a pretty good bounce means is that you have a pretty steep sloping RSI going up, and what that implies to me is, if the bears actually try to push down the price action from there, right? You're still very likely to get a bounce afterwards, because on the RSI you're still gonna have to beat this. You're gonna have to go lower than this low here, right? But since we have a pretty steep sloping, upward sloping RSI here, it's gonna be pretty hard for the bears to actually beat it. Not 100%, of course, but that usually means if the bears actually try to push the price action down afterwards, we're still going to get a bounce and see where the price action lands. So 6-hour time frame, very similar, double bottom, bullish divergence, pretty good bounce here. 1-hour time frame, okay, we are still seeing higher lows, right? Comparing to that low there where we got to about 74,000, 74.7. Okay, now we have rebounded and we're still seeing higher lows here, and we're trying to get back above some of these lower moving averages. So that's basically what I'm looking at here for Bitcoin. I think, in my opinion, it still looks like a very bullish chart. There are reversal indicators all over. Of course, that is just my speculations and opinions, not financial advice, right? You guys do your own research and logic, right? Don't just base your actions based on what I'm saying or anyone else on the internet. Let's take a look into the stock market futures, S&P 500. Right, that's very important because there is high correlation between the S&P 500 and Bitcoin, and the S&P 500 can usually be a front-running signal for Bitcoin, okay? Usually not 100%. There has been times where the correlation kind of decouples, right? But very important S&P 500 futures chart here, because on this weekly time frame, this week we have hit a support very precisely here, right? So this support I'm talking about is on, you can see on the weekly time frame, you can see on the longer time frames, the monthly time frame, okay? You can even get a better view here, is basically price action has actually retested the support at 4,800. And this support is important because price action has actually broken out of this pattern here from before at January 2024. And we're basically retesting that breakout point. So what this says is, if this is actually the bottom for S&P 500 and the S&P 500 is highly correlated with Bitcoin most of the time, this could be a pretty good setup for crypto, given that S&P 500 doesn't dip down further. The next level down would be the weekly 200 SMA, which is about 4,700, which could still be a pretty steep way down, right? That's about, more than 5%. Let's take a look into smaller time frames for S&P 500. We are on the 3-day 200 moving average. We are oversold, right? Way oversold on a daily time frame. 12-hour time frame, we're getting a higher low here. 6-hour time frame, we do have a double bottom with bullish divergence after a very, very oversold 6-hour move here. Hourly time frame, we can see a very similar chart with Bitcoin, right? We have higher lows since the rebound of this thing. So, in my opinion, I think this is actually looking pretty good. Of course, unless anything breaks here that I've talked about, and we're gonna revisit this chart and see how it looks. But as of right now, these charts look very good to me, right? And gonna be keeping an eye out on what happens next. And that's basically it for today. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe. I'll bring you guys daily updates, and have a beautiful day.